All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Scott LeMay, and this is the Data Driven Supply Chain Podcast. I'm joined by my co host, Yacine, who is the COO of Axia, as well as a guest that I'm very excited to speak to. Joining us today is Drura Parrish. He's joining us from Lexington, Kentucky, and he's the co founder of Bcom. Previously, Drura also founded another startup, Maketime, which went on to merge with the manufacturing powerhouse Xometry. So, welcome, Drura. How's life? What's happening?
Life is good. Like we were just speaking, I'm a little nervous that my children are going to blow the door down. But other than that, everything is good. It's been a splendid, wonderful, beautiful Friday. That's all I can say.
Amazing. Well, we'll get through as many questions as we can before any kids come bursting through the doors. As I mentioned, you co-founded Bcom. Did you want to give our audience, before we start, a little insight into what's going on over there and what are some of the problems you're solving for?
Oh Jesus, just coming strong. So it's kind of funny. You live this stuff all day, and then somebody asks you what the hell you're doing, and you have no idea. So we're all from similar worlds on this little podcast, and one thing that throughout my career that I've been adamant about is, increasing the speed by which, somebody can conceive and do something. And so with Make Time, it was about how can we take the hardest, most time intensive thing for a creative or an engineer, the most mundane thing, which is just like quoting to get something done. How do we expedite that? And then after doing Make Time, and then subsequently Xometry, and I'm a shop rat from the beginning, but noticed that all the while that demand for manufacturing and demand for goods is going up, and supply or supply chain never felt as much pressure before, even though it looks so promising. In particular, American machine shops, the costs weren't going down, and ironically, they're going up. So Bcom is just basically, the world's largest now industrial parts kind of price intelligence platform, and also not only can you check the price across 500 vendors so that that you're getting the best price, for example, but you can do it in a fraction of the time. Even though the irony is, like, we think that Google and all these tools that we have and all these ERPs and all this blah 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 can help us. It doesn't. Technology has only added complexity. So anyway, so we've stripped down the complexity. Just say, okay, like, how much is a drill here, here, and here? How much is an end mill here, here, and here? And then show people the pricing trends. And then also, while you're seeing what those best prices are and you have the confidence for that, you can check out at 55,000 vendors with 55,000 products all in one cart. So basically, it's trying to, just peel back the past 20 plus years of quote unquote so-called productivity and parts distribution to give like makers and manufacturers a little more leverage and on the price cycle side, so that part production price can go down, so that more things can get made more cheaply, and then subsequently hopefully people with crazier ideas can make even crazier shit. And so that's it. It's just like, think of it like as the dumbest, biggest, smartest industrial supplies place in the world. It's just tons of fun.
I love that last explanation. The dumbest, biggest, smartest. Well, I wanted to give you the chance to just get your name out there right off the bat, because I'm sure we'll get into some other conversations. But great kind of first explanation. It's a great platform. I would encourage everyone to check it out right after this. Can you let us know how you eventually transitioned into finding, let's say, your meaningful place in supply chain? I'm curious to learn more about your manufacturing story.
For sure, yeah. So, I started out in manufacturing, right? My family, they were manufacturers, or they grew into manufacturing. And so it was in my blood. And there was you just can't leave that kind of DNA. And so I went off to, this is kind of interesting. This is my, another quasi connection here to Canada, or at least French Canada. I went to work at a chateau in Haute-Savoie in France. I was working in a CNC machine shop after undergraduate, and the head of the shop, he was Swiss, and he's like, "Hey, a friend of the family he's the house manager for a chateau, and they need a laborer. You know, do you want to go over there?" I was like, "Fuck yeah, I want to go over there." I was not like, you know, at that time, I was like in a garage machine shop, which is not a happy place, and it was a happy place. But it was just not a happy place. Like if you're 20 something and somebody says, "Do you want to go to France and live in chateau?" You say, "Yeah." So so I went there, and it was the chateau that unified. It was Pelly's chateau, and he was the great unifier of France. And they just had me build shit everywhere. So I was just building, and making, like built like outhouses, guest houses, and stuff. And the guy was like, "Hey," the guy that owned it, he was an architect, and he's like, "You should go to architecture school." So here I was at a machine shop, and the guy was like, "Hey, you should go into architecture." So I go into architecture, and I went all over the place in architecture, and I landed at a place called SciArc in Los Angeles, which is pretty experimental architecture school. Like crazy shit goes on there. Like if you just go down like the list of alumni, like a lot of these people go out and just build crazy startups, like in robotics and things like that. The whole premise, you know, there is just like, yeah, just fucking do it. Just like whatever the imagination can do, like own the industry around it. Like, you know, the way you're, you know, things that I remember that you're taught. So it's like Brunelleschi's dome in Florence is not just beautiful, but it's the ultimate manifestation of like capital markets. Like capital markets were created to sustain Brunelleschi's dome as much as like, and so it's a very like, you know, systems-based way of approaching, you know, life. And so when I was there, the big word was fabrication, like parametric design. People were fucking doing all this crazy shit, but there wasn't anybody dumb enough to build it. Like the big stuff, they just weren't dumb. And then Kian, my Kentucky genetics, I was just always the person be like, "I'll do it." like I'll do it. And like, you know, like they would give me like a 3D file, and I would look at it and just hand shave foam because, you know, we couldn't understand CNC stuff yet. And then we started graduating into CNC, 3D printing. This is all while we were at school. And I remember when I graduated, I had like an outro coffee with the director of my graduate program, Michael Speaks, who's like a huge proponent in design thinking, and like he's a, you know, in practice and agency, what it means, like, you know, 22nd century, not 21st century thinking, like everybody as an entrepreneur through the ability to put something in the world that is inherently like industry and production, stuff like that. And he was like, "Hey, you know, you're like the second best student in this program, which means you're top 50 in the school, which means you're top 5,000 in the West Coast, which means you're top 50,000 in the United." He just kept going. He goes, "Which means you're like, you know, maybe top 200,000 in terms of an architect, which means it's going to be a very hard road for you to do crazy shit." And he's like, "So you might want to think about if you ultimately want to have agency over your own design, what can you do in the market that will increase the potential for you to do the things you want to do?" And I interpreted that as like, oh, like I need to go and facilitate all these crazy ideas. Like just go, you know, think about a contractor, but for the most bizarre of applications, like just things that people were building that otherwise everybody would say no to, you know. So like I'd started doing work for Hernan Diaz Alonso, who's a forever mentor of mine, who just made these crazy parametric forms. And, you know, in order to do it, we had to do, you know, 3D printing to rotomolding. Then we'd had to do vacuum metallization to give it the finish that it needed. And so those are things like at that time, like imagine an artist going into a manufacturing facility and saying, "I want to make this blob silvery." Right? There's just this
Right.
you know, disjoint, and like nobody could communicate. But I was going all over Los Angeles, and at this time in the early 2000s, and if y'all know anything about LA now, it's like 2/3 of the US's CNC install base is in that region now,
Yeah.
because of airspace. Well, all that infrastructure was there, but there wasn't the demand then, right? It's just like starting to grow. So I'd go in and I'd be like, okay, look, I've got this crazy this sculpture thing that I got going to New York. It's not going till May. Can I option? I'd go to El Segundo to an aerospace 5-axis shop, be like, can I option this machine, right? Like I'll pay you your overhead and time that it's sitting there, so that when I need it, I come in, you kick whoever's off, and I run my part. And so I had a little black book, and I'd go around and I'd have all these hours in shops. And so then my job was to go make sure that my demand funnel was going into these. So that was like the beginning of Maketime. Like I was doing what's known as arbitrage, taking underutilized capacity. And then I was putting all these weirdos that had never, ever thought of doing this shit, right? Like to manifest these forms. And, at that point, the big crux was like, they didn't know how to make the file to go onto the machine. They didn't know how to be like Kentucky enough to navigate a shop. And just like, I go in there and I look like a weird lumberjack. And for some reason, nobody would question me. Like I would say all the wrong words, but they would think they were right because that sounded, like a certain way. So long story short, that's where I entered back into manufacturing, just kind of by accident. My love of design, first and foremost, just like facilitating the insane. Like that was my hope, was just like that no would never be the issue for something to enter the market. And so over time, of course, like you start to understand the cost of these things, and then I was like, I've got to parametricize this shit. I can't afford to not understand the economics of these productions. So you start, it starts with an Excel stupid algorithm, and then it starts to mature in a different way. And then before I know it, I moved back to Kentucky because it was cheaper to run a shop here of my own to do assembly. Then I got pulled in to, teach a couple of courses at the University of Kentucky. And like Maketime just happened. Like, and I know that you didn't ask this, but Maketime, I remember talking to a friend, I just talked to him today. And I was just like, look, it's like, I don't know what the hell the next step is. Like, I'm just like, I was maxed out. I had a great economy for myself, but like, was doing so much. And he's like, have you ever heard of the internet? And I was just like, I couldn't tell if the guy was fucking making fun of me or whatever. I was like, but when you think about it, early 2000s, even if somebody asks you if you heard of the internet, it's not preposterous to think that maybe I don't fucking know what the internet really is, you could build on it. This was in the early 2000s. By this time, it's about 2011. And so he's like, you just need to embed your pricing and your methodology and bring your customers to one place. So that's how I got back into the supply chain. A long-winded way of telling you, but that's how.
It's a great story, and I appreciate you sharing that. Something that stuck out to me is you mentioned design a few times. Obviously, you come from a very creative background. I'm curious, as you entered back into manufacturing, I'd like to touch on creativity a little bit. What is missing in supply chain and manufacturing? How can we be more creative? Why does the industry need creativity, and how can we get there?
No, I love that question. I think creativity has become such a bad word. Like, especially the advent of I think you think about creativity as it applies to ML and AI, which is potentially more creative, for example. We can get into that in a second. But I think that what I learned through my education about creativity is inherently the difference between efficiency and invention, or invention and innovation, right? And I think that neither are bad, but design teaches you that if design is great, it exceeds all value, right? It's inherently 150%. You're not approaching 100%. And so that always stuck with me. Back to Brunelleschi's dome. It's just to build the world's largest dome, so many things, fucking perspectival drawing was basically invented to articulate the dome, which became.
And maybe for our audience, not to interrupt you, maybe if you can give the background of Brunelleschi's dome to set the scene.
Yeah, well, I just like the 1 minute story is like the Medici's are like, we need the world's biggest fucking dome. Like, we're going to unify currency and make Florence, the capital of like a unified currency. And Brunelleschi is like, holy shit, I don't know how to fucking do this. And so he goes off and he invents the tools to do it. Like, and most notably perspectival drawing, which now it gave rise to 3D, everything 3D, like Descartes comes along, like all these fucking people come along just because of the fucking crazy proposition. So you've got a problem, the world's biggest dome, because the world's most powerful family wants an expression of something. And then subsequently you have tools to create a gazillion things forever. And so back to creativity, it's like, the one, I'll kind of bounce around for a second, but I'll never forget, like in the 80s, these 80s and 90s, these integrators would come visit my family. Oh, we can increase your operational efficiency, blah, 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 forever, blah, 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 blah. Like, we can do this, blah, 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 blah. And my grandfather, after they would leave, it's not that every manufacturer doesn't, or anybody that makes anything, love the idea of that dream. It's just how can it happen, right? Because like everybody's hair's on fire. So then, for example, for my family, like in answering that question, I remember him talking to one of these integrators. It's like, fine, just build me another factory while I'm doing this. My point in bringing that up is just like, creativity is a hard economical proposition when the pressure around everybody is so immense. And it's just like, and when the penalties for operation, you guys are, serving aerospace, and you guys are serving, automotive, and like, 1 second down. So if you think about truly what is the place of creativity in manufacturing, it's a hard one, because it's almost like it's like you have what we have now, hit the fucking nuke button, then we've got to do something else. So I really do think that like you will always have problem solvers. You will always have, magicians of efficiency, but like creativity, I would argue the place for it. And I just had this conversation the past 2 days that, I don't know if you can hear the construction, I'm sorry, is that the one thing that AI, I think, brings, I don't give a fuck about any of the other magic that it purports. I think it will bring the greatest hardware acceleration that we've ever seen, and it will create gaps to allow people to start thinking creatively again. So I think the confluence of those two things, hardware, in order, like when I say hardware, we are going to have to think about making machines to accommodate AI more. And by us doing that, we're going to reconfigure supply in a way that we've never thought, which in turn is going to help us rethink all the shit we can make on the new stuff, right? And while that's happening, all the new softwares that are going to come in there are just going to fucking kill wasted time. And so as a result, my hope is that creativity, in its purest form, we're like 10 years out. Like we're like 15 years out, where it's just like, where we're like, why are we still fucking printing like this, sometimes like that, and cutting like this, and sometimes like that, and why aren't we just doing that? And so once we fucking get there, then we get back to like, what's the really fucking hard question we want to apply to these new methodologies? Like the problem is, I don't know if you guys have seen that horrible, the fuck is the name of it? Arrival. Have you seen Arrival? It's the Alien movie.
Yeah. I see it with the time stuff, and then
that's right.
The language.
With the languages, right? Yeah. Okay.
So manufacturing's limit is the language that we use inherently to make things. G code, like M code, like whatever these process-based, the fucking Roland printer language from fucking 1965, whatever the hell it is. Like we are limited by this, and you can't just slap on new efficiencies to holistically change the whole thing. right? And so like creativity is just like, I just feel like it's just like we'll get there. Right now we're edging towards, 48% efficiency through the whole supply chain. I mean, just like think for a fucking second, like think about SAP, like as a piece of software.
Yep.
Think about any of the software we fucking make. There's like problems that we approach creatively, but we're not being like truly creative in the output of what that thing is.
Yeah.
Like creativity in manufacturing is literally hitting a button, and you and I all have fucking, like a car made out of fucking French fries, and then we're like, oh, that was wrong. Make it out of fucking spaghetti. That's just the messiness of that is creative. It's just like, what is the fucking hardest question that we can ask and get a result out of? It's not like how, can we get to Mars in 28 days? Right? It's not like that. It's just like, what's the harder question? And until we can't find the fucking question to ask, we're always operating, I think, in a sphere of efficiencies and innovation versus invention. So
I love that response, and Yacine, I'm sure you have some input here on the topic of creativity in manufacturing. What are some of your thoughts here?
Yeah, well, this whole discussion that we had on creativity, one student of mine that he worked at our company for a while, is working on breaking the mold of like a 3D printing of homogeneous structure, because you can 3D print homogeneous structure. It's pretty easy. But when you look at in nature, like a bug, a cell, whatever, how it's structured internally, it's not homogeneous, it's heterogeneous. So it's more efficient. But when you look at the tool to actually try to replicate this, it's super complicated. So the guy spent like 6 years just to try to break this barrier, so that we can think more now into making something heterogeneous. So okay, I just need those kind of parameter for this thing that will hold this, and it can have holes in it. There will be less material, but I just want it done, and then in a non-parametric way, a bit organically, it can build something that will sustain this. But then you need to be able to kind of do it. And the 3D printer could technically do it, but we cannot generate this efficiently. And that's the problem. The problem is not like actually putting the stuff together. It's at the limitation of how do we express that.
Right.
So it resonated a lot, and I do agree. Like that creativity is limited by these constraints here.
It's fascinating. It really is. Like, it's just like the crux of it. Like, I just like, if like we came back from the future, let's just say 100 years from now, and we look at what we have infrastructurally, we'd be like, oh no, like it just oh no. It's like stamping, cutting, packaging things. It's always coming down to like kind of almost your point. It's just like assembly, like very unsuccessful assemblies too, like inefficient, like not even, beauty isn't a component. Like there's nothing that we've made really that can rival the structures that are already out there for us just to grab. Like, and I'm just constantly amazed by that. It's just like, so, you just think about like, back in the day when I was in architecture, MIT was doing a lot, just like with organic printing, and they're still doing stuff like that, but to like multi-material printing, like looking at like cellulose, like looking at like how do we grow stuff. And it's just like, you just think about what we're doing now. It's just so rudimentary. It's going to be the same as when we exhumed, like, did you guys see that they think they just found the oldest structure ever made by a humanoid from 500,000 years ago? And it's really no different than what we're fucking doing now. It's, wood.
I haven't seen that, no.
Yeah, it was just like, wood that was carved to fit over wood, like it had a platform and they had sharp stuff cutting it. And so it's like, cool, we have cars, what the fuck ever. It doesn't mean anything. So anyway, but that's fascinating. After this, I want to learn more about what do you teach? Do you still teach?
Me? No, I don't
Yeah.
teach. He was an intern and he was working with me on different like AI project that we're
Yeah.
doing, but he was doing his thesis at the same time. And the stuff he was doing, the problem he had to solve, the technical ones in order to do that were crazy. But the cool thing is that he open source his code. So we're one step further.
I love that. I love that. If we could just teach the rest of the world how to use open source to their advantage now, then that's the
Yeah.
hey. But that's always I love the the startup trap. Like no matter how sexy something is, your go to market is always just like I just like it could be the sexiest AI blah 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 like sentient like laser bot, and you're still scraping leads off to get somebody to buy your sentient like
That
laser
resonates.
bot.
Yeah, I mean,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's
The
hilarious.
best.
One thing that I want to that's awesome. One thing that I want to go back on is in one of your when you're talking about your transition, I think from architecture to manufacturing, or no, when we were talking about creativity, you said what's the biggest problem we can think of, right? Like we got to think bigger. So I want to chat a little bit about design thinking for a minute. So why is design thinking important for manufacturing and procurement going forward? What are some impacts, and maybe if just for the sake of it, what would be the 30-second kind of overview of what design thinking means, and then how can that be applied to manufacturing to make a bigger impact? If that's too much, then we can break that down.
No, I mean that's a lot, and I'm gonna certainly botch it. Full disclosure too, I used to teach architecture, and I'll never forget like I would like give a lecture and I would like quote all these philosophers like in what they would say, and the student would be like, that's not what they said, and I'd be like, no, that's what they said, and then they would read it out loud and they'd be like, no, they didn't say that at all, and they'd be like, you're wrong. So design thinking very subjectively it's not, once again, it's not solving the problem. It's starting with something that's presented as a problem, and once again exceeding by creating value above what the natural solution would be, right? It's a complicated thing to unpack. So it's like if somebody asks you, like a great example is do you guys know Frank Gehry's Guggenheim Bilbao Museum?
I'm not too familiar. No.
Okay, and do you know Frank Gehry, the architect? I think he's from Toronto. Come on.
We'll have to look this up after the show. Yeah. But no, if you can elaborate, that would be awesome.
So, like Frank Gehry, and this is going to be like a botched example of design thinking, but he was first a modernist, and he was a postmodernist. So he went from cubes to like and like form follows function kind of stuff to like, oh, I'm going to make an advertising agency the building looks like a pair of binoculars, to more like gestural. And you're going to see like a lot of, like analogous stuff to Brunelleschi's Dome, where he's like making these like forms over boxes, right? In order to make the forms over the boxes, he had to talk to then CATIA, the software company, right? Which was, all aerospace, like the highest tolerance in the biz. But he was like, the only material that they could get that would be light enough on some of the buildings that he was making was titanium. In order to get the curvature and the formwork for the titanium, it had to be extremely precise. So he went from, like expression to like the most extreme precision. And then, so he starts a software company called Gehry Technologies to start accommodating the production of these forms, which becomes a little bit bigger than like his actual design practice. Then Bilbao, Spain, which is like kind of like an automotive, like kind of an industrial center in Spain, was like, hey, we've got a museum, why don't you design it? So he designs this thing. You guys should just Google it real quick. This is a while ago. And they build this thing, and it's out of titanium, and the world is just like fucking floored. And so tourism starts to go up. People don't recognize Bilbao as like this center of what it was. All of a sudden, it's where the museum is, right? All of a sudden, people are just going to see this, this effort, like of just like all this stuff. And so I just bring that back up, like, so design thinking, and like, once again, just like an application to all this stuff, it's like flying a kite, right? You have two constraints, right? Or not two, but you have an anchor and you have some amount of force.
Yeah.
And wherever and whatever you do with that force is up to you. The problem with manufacturing is that it's not naturally fluid. Like, it doesn't reward that fluidity. Like, so if you think about, we're going to make the best car in the world, and like, hang on, Sarah's got a great idea. We're going to fucking stop everything and do it. But in American history, there's a great essay, and I always forget the essayist. The essay was called The Everyday Aesthetics of Being. And so in the early automotive world, the people on the assembly line were noted for the signature they left on each and every car, because they were still, putting a bumper on, bolting, hammering, like some of the angles to make it right. And so there was this observation that, like, it was the collective effort of this hive making individual, like, design, like aesthetic based decisions that gave America the ability to produce cars like they did. So back to now, and like kind of getting lost in this question, it's just like, I don't know where and how, it's applied. Like, the places that I see it successful is like less about the stuff that people are doing, but now more about building the machines. Like, factories are machines now. Like, what does Elon call the big battery facility, whatever, but just like making these incredibly flexible, like turn on a dime, but they never work that way, right? These like buildings are machines. There's not just machines in a building. So it's like, I don't know if there's like a place outside of, how a product is incepted in the beginning that design thinking should carry or can carry through, like the highest functioning supply chain, right? Like, you're not going to go to Boeing and say, hey, let's make you guys better by like doing a design thinking workshop.
Yeah.
Right. There's just too much. So it goes back to like, well, where and how can you alleviate time cycles and pressure so that becomes an opportunity? And how do you build a fucking process-based sandbox for these types of businesses? Like, that's just, to me, that's like always like going back to my grandfather being like, yeah, build us another fucking factory. Are we at a point like where that is something of interest? There's something going on in the insurance industry where they're finding that it is cheaper to offer redundancy and production capabilities to massive companies versus underwrite them for potential bad stuff to happen. What I mean is, like, so instead of like a big automotive company paying X number of dollars for disaster or a potential disaster or supply chain issues, the insurers are like, let us build you the biggest factory in the most stable place in the world. In the event something happens, that you will not be stopped. So if you think like in that regards, like, to me, that is design thinking, where you're like, we can't fundamentally think about how to mitigate a lot of the issues that might happen in a factory, but we can build a system in a whole new factory. Like, that's just like, it's the kite. You just like let it flow. Like, so, so that, like, it's so complicated. So it's, but it's magical to think about. Go ahead.
It truly is. And Yacine, is there anything you wanted to add on to that? I've got a million questions. Yacine, are there any questions you want to ask on your end?
No, but I loved all of your example, because I absolutely love designer. Like yesterday, I was presenting in front of students. It's art students in the engineering department, that took a course on generative AI. So it's like super eclectic. But I'm always fascinated by the this design thinking kind of concept, because it's one of the things that you kind of feel, and every explanation of it is just like it's simple, but then it's just like it's a bunch of example to show you that it's something that is kind of lived. And there's very few things like this in the world, but like I totally get it. And I totally get how when you kind of go back to the system and then you improve the whole system, then there's more than just like problem thinking or problem solving. It's like it's more of the stuff you're changing the whole kind of game. But it's a mindset that is very difficult to articulate and a bit alien to a lot of people. It took me a long time to kind of get the hang of it.
But that's what I love about, whatever the current state of AI is, doesn't matter. I think it's what it's allowing to think, which is, what are we greater than AGI? How do we accomplish that? And that's why I was saying, I think like the next push is just going to be like everything. Like I think AI is going to create its own flywheel of like making things to help its survival and help its own growth. But I think this is where design thinking kind of takes over. That system naturally is going to create something greater than whatever the sum of the inputs are, right? And the answer is not like, for example, humanity or like, greater capacity for humans. It's just going to be something alien. Like, and I don't mean outer space. It's just like magic. Finally, like fucking magic can happen, because this thing is just going to cycle. It's just like the entropy of all the bullshit in life. Like, it's like, it's just going to create its own fundamental, like, hell-based butter churn. I don't know how to describe it other than like, and so I get very hopeful to think like, okay, well, what the fuck, back to like, what would we ask ourselves if everything is possible?
Yeah.
And it's like, maybe, like,
and then you push the limit, and then you go into another, like you said, the dome thing. Then you with this new paradigm, you check where the limit is, and then you can finally burst a bit more.
Yeah,
go ahead, Scott. Sorry,
it's good.
Philosophical questions.
I was gonna say I love how much alien talk has happened. We've managed to throw in an alien here, an alien there. It's great. So I appreciate that. Something that I wanted to ask. We're both in the procurement space here with our software, and it's a hot topic right now, digital transformation. I was curious from your lens, Drura, what does digital transformation in procurement mean? Because we hear a lot about that these days.
This absolute same thing with a different interface. Like, I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer. It's like, but that's really, when you think about the stuff that all of us are doing, it's workflows and based off of some table somewhere. Like, and so digital transformation, I think the most ambitious thing that we can hope for is, and what we are all trying to do, but I don't think we're doing as good as we hope, is like adoption. Like, I think adoption is the sexiest word that people don't talk about within the world of digital transformation. It's like, how the fuck do you get somebody to take the risk to try something that is fractionally better? Because digital transformation, as we all present it, really, it is like, and I'm not disparaging, fractionally better in our world is like hundreds of billions of dollars and like throughput change, right? But that, to get somebody to adopt, it goes back to that GTM thing that we're talking about. No matter how sexy it is, you're still advertising or emailing the person that's not allowed to look at their web browser in a factory. They're looking for solutions while they're taking a dump, like, like on their personal phone. But so like when you think about digital transformation, it's just like for our world that's such a hive mentality, like digital transformation is just like the first like I don't even know what measurement, the smallest, like nanometer of the supply chain stuff, right? It's just like, how do you get that fractional trust for fractional change for like exponential output so all this other awesome stuff can happen?
Yeah.
And it's just like, go ahead.
Yeah, but I like that you anchored it on the word adaption, because like when you look at the system paused and you're like, if we all pause, right, and you take this and then you adapt it, you're gonna get better. But the main issue is that the system is in motion. The plane need to leave, right? The pipe that you're doing need to be done, and you need to give that to your customer. And this is the main issue, is that how do you get someone that is like sleeping like 5 hours a day because he's overwhelmed, to kind of just take a step back and learn how to use this and take the risk in order for him to actually sleep better and not be overwhelmed. And I think in terms of digital transformation and improving like this fractional output that actually leave the people to be able to do more after the fact, is the single most important thing to get
It
right.
is.
If you don't get this right, you can have the most beautiful solution, right? But if you have to pause the system in order for this to work, you will never get it. It will never happen.
No, and I think what I get really worried about, just for our breed of startup, is that the channels are still owned by much larger companies because the cycles take so long. Sure. And the risk reward on the investment side doesn't play that time game very well. But back to like design thinking, creativity, and all these massive things that happen, what has to happen is a massive influx of digestible technology, to your point, that can just bolt on as people move. Yeah. And I just feel, there was talk in the like 2010s, GE and companies were trying to come up with a universal platform that all companies could just, they weren't actually trying to be selfish. They were just like, we have to find a way that every company can just plug stuff in and evaluate.
Yeah.
Right. Like, how do you, just stuff like, buy a package of formulas for, metal casting, or just like whatever it is. Because to your point, like right now, the only solution really is like when you've got 50,000 employees and 25% of them are working offline on their spreadsheets, and their ERPs are just like legacy and some terminal and blah, blah, blah. It's impossible. So it's like,
yeah,
digital transformation as it stands, unfortunately, is just 100% reliant on a roulette game of adoption.
Yeah.
And there is no proven method for like infrastructural systems. Like, y'all provide a great infrastructural system, and like, there's other platforms that are doing great things, but just like if I had one fucking dream, like back to the analogy, my grandfather just like, build us another factory. Just like, how do we build, how can we mirror systems in a zero trust environment, which is what is needed. Like, like you said, like if you could go into a customer and say, here, just press this button, all your data is going to pop over here right now, and I'm going to show you a simulation using your real-time data over the next 6 months. They'll be like, okay, fine, we'll buy it. Like, they'll just like, that's what it would take.
Yeah. It will take that. It will take the easiness, but it also will take the trust that you can pull it off. And that's especially in manufacturing, because the whole industry is trust-based. Like that's like you go with the supply. Why? Because we kind of trust him that he will not mess it up, right? And will not mess up the whole supply chain. But that's kind of how it's duct taped together. But when you jump something in the middle of this, the trust needs to be super high, and the friction of adoption would need to be like none. And if you get that, then they get in and then okay, perfect. Now it start to work.
Yeah, and
But,
that's not hard. Yeah, that's not hard at all.
No, it's super easy. We do that every day. It didn't take any time to get any client. No.
It's like, trust me, I'm Canadian. Like we do nothing wrong.
We're very polite up here. Well,
Yeah.
I need to start throwing in some F-bombs.
Yes.
Yacine, am I good? Am I good? Yeah. No, I love it. I just want to touch right now on, and I don't know how much time you have left, Drura, but we can kind of start wrapping it up whenever you want. But I was curious, in 2023, what are your thoughts on what are major blockers to stability and efficiency in the total supply chain? And if you have an answer for that, what are some ways we can kind of get around those blockers?
Well, I mean, I think the most important thing that we've discussed, like, is exactly the kind of the diagram, the velocity of trust.
Yep.
You know, I think that is everything. Like whatever that graph is for adoption. Like I don't care about, you know, like we can say everything, like climate, you can say all this stuff, like throughput, material, like resources, commodity, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. None of it matters if we cannot increase the rate of new technology adoption within these companies, and we cannot increase that rate without exactly what you're talking about. So either we change the vector, right? Or we come up with like a solution for that vector problem. I don't even know if that's the right phrase. It sounds sexy, but
It works.
Yeah, we just have to change that signature, be able to provide, you know, the technology, you know, for that evaluation. Because I mean, it's like, trust is such bullshit. It really is. And like, I'm from a part of the United States where that is the currency. Like, you know, it's just like, it is an anecdotal, like a bucket of anecdotal gobbledygook that we base every phone call or whatever on. And it's just like, it gets really exhausting. You know, I've been doing just this manufacturing specific, like technology specific stuff for like going on, like, it feels like, you know, well, 20 years more or less. And it's just one very similar situation after another. So y'all are the next generation, the youngest generation. And it's like, to get over this, something in the product inherently has to address it, like for evaluation. The notion of enterprise software has to go away, right? We have to think more compartmentalized, I think, like to get over this trust component. Like, how can you evaluate and digest things that show the total programmatic capabilities of something that you're building, right? It's just like, it's all those things. Like if you think about, like, it always gets dumbed down into this mill, like, you know, you're a startup. Okay, well, you can start cheap, but you have to eventually go into enterprise. You got to get the bigger contracts. Those sales cycles are going to be greater than 90 days, most likely 180 days in order, blah, 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 blah. Like all this shit. And just like back to creativity, like fundamentally, like what the fuck can we do, like to provide instant solutions so that the longer tail of what we've made. Like, here's another fascinating thing. Every one of us manufacturing startups, we started with like a core hypothesis of one tiny solution. But then we built platforms to rationalize it. That's like the thing that, you know, just like, but that one solution, whatever, like for example, at Maketime, it wasn't a great pricing algorithm. It was pure fucking garbage in the beginning. Like all we had was like
love the honesty.
I mean, it was basically like, you know, like, how much does this thing cost? Like basically our software said, I don't know, fuck it, $10. So, but the beauty is like, it doesn't make any difference.
Exactly like a human. This is cool. It's like AGI.
That's right. We're ahead of the curve. So, but anyway, like I just, you know, bring that up. It's just like the biggest blocker is adoption. It's evaluation, adoption, and evolution of software from one company to a company that's using it. And what I'm totally like fearful of, and I'm not saying like the SAPs and like, you know, the Epicors are horrible companies, but they're the ones that are in place, right, to offer the new stuff. But their incentives are different. Like the thing that I love so much about startups is like there is a genuineness to the solution setting. Like you know, people don't doubt for a second that y'all want to help whoever your customer is. Like I want to really help my customer. It's not that SAP doesn't. It's just like the distance from, you know, why they're doing to the financial mechanisms that they're doing to the customer like hope is, it's just a lot different. So if you get a bunch of us working in magnitude, and this is like all like, you know, way conflated and like way too optimistic here, that's when we open up all this other shit that we're talking about. But it starts with how the fuck I think we can be more honest with our customers and showing them the true solution of what we're doing. And I think it's also like there's just like some leveling and like, you know, right sizing in terms of like what the capital hopes are, you know, both on the ingestion, like what a company needs to survive and make stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't know, but it's deeply worrying to me. Like, because going back to that question, no matter people can say fucking, okay, like climate change, it doesn't fucking matter. Like even with all the you know, the gusto and push that like the world's going to melt, it still doesn't mean that somebody's going to stop using chemical A, right? And so if that's not going to happen, manufacturing, they're just not going to stop. And to your point earlier, Yacine, like, and just like press pause to evaluate.
Well, no one wants to press pause. That's the main thing, and no one can, because if you press pause, why? And I'm a competitor. Why would I press pause if you're paused? I was just gonna go faster.
That's right.
This is why it's like more of the same, and like a bit of incremental stuff. But I think like from what you said, the actual solution for like more stability, more efficiency, I think will happen in two ways: in the gap in the system that will change the system after. I think this is where it's at. I don't think it's like the big players that will kind of go and move the thing, because they're gonna break the stuff that is already piped. They will just break the street. They will break the pipe. While all of the smaller player and while understanding like what's going on and how to smooth out, increase that trust with the advent of more data and better visibility on this, and look at the gap in the system and capitalize on that. I'm hopeful that this will allow people to have an ongoing system that is less less fast, right? If there's something that is ongoing, okay, cool, I will let it move. I know where it's gonna go, but then I can improve myself, and then when I come back, I'm gonna do the right move. But when it's going like 100 miles per hour downhill, no helmet, you're not gonna step any second out of this.
Right.
So, but to your point, I think this is the looping back the design thinking and the change having to happen from the startup. I think the stability and efficiency will come from these small players, and we'll see more of them, especially in supply chain, because there's tremendous opportunity to not just do incremental improvement, but really to literally change the whole game, because no way it can still hold on with what we've been doing for 20 years. Too much change for this to be true.
Right. No, I think it's beautiful. And the notion of the gap, I think you could sum up everything from this podcast is just, now I'm very hopeful that we can all accelerate our exploitation of the gap, right? To better increase the odds of adoption, like throughout supply chain. But that's like, it's a really nice visual to think about being able to attack that way.